Okay, next Kristi Markey is going to present. Tom really did a great introduction into what Kristi is going to talk about. And the other thing I'd like to just note, Tom mentioned the 5,900 homes that have been entitled in the former Fort Ord. I just always have to say, you know, that doesn't account for the other 5,000 or so houses throughout Monterey County that have been entitled and not yet built. So currently there's about 10,800 homes throughout Monterey County, most of which focused in the former Fort Ord, that can build tomorrow if they so desire. They're entitled, but just waiting for the economy to come back. It's always something I like to keep in mind, and LandWatch would like you to keep in mind. So, Kristi Markey, you're up.
Thanks, Amy. Okay, it's always tough to follow Tom. He's a teacher.
You're an attorney.
I'm an attorney, yeah, but we do a lot of research and writing. So my presentation will not be as compelling as Tom's. It's going to be more dry, I think, but I think it's information that you might be interested in having. So,
are you lawyery?
I tried not to be lawyerly. I really did. I was asked to talk about the Fort Ord base reuse plan, and that is a fairly dry document. With the attachments, it's about 1,100 plus pages with a lot of land use jargon and whatnot, but I'm going to try to hit the highlights. And I also want to empower you to take a look at the base plan and the EIR. I know some of you in this room are accustomed to looking at these kinds of documents and deciphering the information and using it for making good points in government meetings. So the website for FORA is very easy, www.fora.org, and the base reuse plan is on there except for the attachments. You have to ask for the attachments from FORA, and the portions of the EIR are also on there. Now this is the tricky part, right? Again, some of you in this room have been through this exercise in looking at the plan documents. You read the plan, and you find that there's a statement on page 53 that doesn't match the statement on page 240. And so you're trying to figure out what's the right answer. And then on top of that, you find other documents outside the plan that have yet other numbers. And so this is a problem that Supervisor Parker has raised with the FORA staff to say, look, we're about to go through a reassessment of the base plan, and Tom almost got to that point, so I'll pick up from there. One of the great things that the Sierra Club did was to require that there be a reassessment of the base plan by 2014. So we're coming up upon that date, and so FORA is in the process of hiring a consultant, which will happen on Friday, and the consultant will be holding community meetings to get input from the community about what do you think about the plan, how it's gone so far, and what you want to see in the future. These meetings will be very important, and I encourage everybody to attend. I know LandWatch will be sending out announcements, and Supervisor Parker's office will include announcements in our electronic newsletter. So you should get word through one of us.
You can sign up with your email.
Sign up for LandWatch's emails. And so I think that's a very important thing to do. But Supervisor Parker has raised the point that, for people who are going to sit down and read this 450-page plan document, they're going to get some wrong information, because there have been changes that FORA and the cities and the county have agreed to since 2001, when the plan document was published, last published, and you won't have that information. And so, for example, there were some changes to the plans in the East Garrison area, which is on the east side of Fort Ord, and some of the planned uses in Parker Flats, which is the area around 8th and Giggling, they swapped some of the land uses. So when you read the sections of the plan on East Garrison and Parker Flats, it's outdated information. So that can be a frustration, and so we've asked FORA staff to make sure that when we get to the reassessment process and we're sharing information with the public and the board of FORA, that we give people current information so that everybody's operating on the same set of facts. Debate is often difficult around land use issues, but when people are operating from different facts, it becomes impossible. So that is something that we've asked, and as a member of the community, you can ask for that as well if you don't find the information to be clear. So Tom went through some numbers. The base plan calls for 12,449 housing units in Fort Ord, most of which are new, but that document does include some that are existing. And of that number, 381 have been built to date, and according to FORA, FORA has slightly different numbers than Tom, and I haven't figured out why yet, but they say that there's 4,081 entitled but not yet built. The base plan also calls for 12 million square feet of business park / light industrial / office research and development. Very little of that has been built. And actually, before we move off of that, I put on the table some one-page documents. It's a chart with very small print. Not my fault. That is the size of the print in the base plan. It's also printed on recycled paper in District 4. We recycle. So, so if you're looking at something about gang violence and you're wondering what you have in your hand, flip it over. You all have something different on the side. There's gang violence, there's FORA stuff, there's Natividad Medical Center stuff. It's very interesting. But look at the chart. That's the piece that I wanted you to look at, and I wanted to empower you with how to read this chart, because I found it a little hard to read, and if you need readers, pull them out. But I'll give an example here. And I apologize that there aren't enough. I only brought 40. I don't know why I'd not been to one of these, Amy, I'm sorry. So if you can share with a neighbor. But this is page 91 of the base plan. You can read the page number on the bottom right there. But if you look at the chart, it shows the 3 major jurisdictions. I note that Delray Oaks is left off of here, but the 3 major jurisdictions, Marina, Seaside, and Monterey County. And then down the left column, it talks about the land use, although the first 2 on that list are actually CSU and the POM annex, so it's not exactly land use. But the way that you read this is, let's just take a look at housing. On the left-hand side, that column, it's the 3rd one down. It says housing, and then in parentheses, units. And if you go across, you see 704 acres of housing in the city of Marina, and then the next number is 4,152, and you'll see that this column is labeled units / square feet / rooms. So for housing, that's why this is confusing, but for housing, that means 4,152 units. But then when you drop down to the next row, which is business park / light industrial / so on, you look at the number 5,360. That is square feet plus 3 zeros on the end. So it's actually 5.3 million. Okay. The 3 zeros, it says that somewhere here, but I can't read it, but it is 3 zeros. So it does add up to 12 million when you go across to the total. So it's pretty, as Tom said, it was a pretty ambitious plan. 45,000 jobs. Yeah, that didn't happen. So, and I also, I was looking at a presentation that Michael Hulemard had done. I know some of you from FORA are here, and it talked about 18,000 jobs. So again, we've got different numbers, and I'm not sure where the discrepancies are. So anyway, that chart, I think, is a good tool. And the very small print at the top, it says, the aggregate totals provide a, quote, not to exceed envelope of development within the former Fort Ord. So I think that from a community point of view, if people are concerned about the impact of development in Fort Ord, it is good to be familiar with this chart. Water, okay, one of my favorite topics. The water for the Fort Ord developments comes from one source right now, which is the groundwater. So the Army had groundwater wells, which are now being operated by the Marina Coast Water District, and those wells are supplying water for Fort Ord. There is an agreement between the Water Resources Agency and the U.S. Army that says that Fort Ord can use 6,600 acre-feet, and this is a sentence from that agreement that never gets quoted. so long as usage does not aggravate or accelerate existing seawater intrusion. Nobody ever quotes that. But it's in the agreement from 20 years ago. Has seawater intrusion increased? Yes. Yes. So anyway, that's an interesting sentence in that contract. I'm not sure what to do with it, but I just make note of it. The other thing is in the base reuse plan is an estimate of total water needs at build-out, which is 13,500 acre-feet. So you subtract 6,600, and how much water do you need? And where is that water coming from? And again, this is one of those areas where, even though I've been working on this for a couple of years now, I still haven't figured out what the plan is for the water. How much is supposed to come from recycled, how much is supposed to come from reclaimed, how much is supposed to come from a desal plant. Those are all elements of it, but the numbers change, and different people will give you different information. So when you get lost in the sort of numbers game and everyone's got a different fact, I often go back to the base plan and I say, this is the official planning document, and unless you show me something else, this is what I'm going by, because that is the official planning document. So it's an interesting discussion anyway about water. The jurisdictions divvied up the 6,600 acre-feet. And I'm not going to go through the numbers. I have the numbers with me, but I think Monterey County has 710 acre-feet, and I think the Army has close to 1,000, and Delray Oaks got 240 acre-feet. And so what you'll see is that they each got a portion of that 6,600, and Marina and Seaside and the county are very close to having used all their water, but CSU and the Army and Delray Oaks have not. And when I say use their water, there's a lot of entitled projects that have not yet been built. So if you look at actual water usage in Fort Ord, it's well below the 6,600. I think it's 2,000 something, according to the Marina Coast water records. But when you look at what's been entitled and promised water, you can see that Marina, Seaside, and the county are running up against their limit. Now, I've asked the question, of them, you're planning these other developments. Based on my math, you can't do them without some sort of water supply. And there's been talk about, well, maybe the Army will loan us or give us some of its allocation. So, and I asked, well, has anybody asked the Army, and what have they said? Water is very valuable, and I know that the Army is very concerned about water and trying to figure out how to get water for the Presidio, which is locked into the whole Cal-Am problem. And they were trying to look at if they could transfer water rights from Fort Ord to the Presidio, and I'm not sure where that inquiry landed. But the Army's, like any other entity, very aware that water is very precious. So I'm not sure that they're going to be willing to part with their water allocation, or CSU. So I don't know, again, the answer to that question, what will happen with the water supply. And then I was asked to touch briefly on the projects, although Tom kind of ran through them quickly. East Garrison 1, which is, again, it's on the east side of Fort Ord, near Reservation Road, and there's a plan for 1,400 homes, a town center, an arts district. The current developer is called Union Community Partners, and the first building, I'm not sure if it's actually broken ground yet, but they're very close to it, is going to be 68 affordable rental units funded by a state grant. And it's great that we get affordable rentals, but it's going to be by itself in the middle of nowhere with no bus service, no amenities, nothing. So it's not an example of good planning. So the infrastructure is also still under construction, and no lots for homes have been sold yet. It'll be a couple more years. But Union Community Partners has a new schedule agreed upon with the County of Monterey, so that project is at least theoretically moving forward. And then there's a section of land called East Garrison 2. The county has it earmarked for homes, but there's no activity yet, and in fact the property is still owned by FORA, and I think the ESCA process is still going on. Stan is nodding his head, okay, yeah. So they're still doing the cleanup at that property at East Garrison 2. So there's not even any discussion about the future of that property right now. And then Monterey Downs is a project that's in the works. The city of Seaside is doing an EIR. There's about 1,500 residential units planned for that. There's an equestrian training facility. horse racing track, hotel, business district, community horse park. It's quite a large parcel, about 550 acres. And if you want to kind of see where that would be, if you go out to the intersection of 8th and Giggling, which is where a lot of people launch their bike trips from, you can go out there and just take a walk on the paved roads. A lot of the dirt roads, the dirt trails right now are closed for ESCA, and I can never keep track of which ones are open and which ones aren't, and the signs sometimes get taken down. So I'm just going to conservatively tell people, just stay on the paved road. Bring your bike out there. You can bring any kind of bike out there and ride. It's a beautiful place to go ride your bike. So you can get a feel for what is there and what might be planned there. There's also the East Side Parkway, which has also been somewhat in the news. It's a proposed road from General Jim Moore Boulevard to Inner Garrison Road, and it was designed as an alternative route from the Seaside, Delray Oaks, Monterey area to Salinas. There was a Highway 68 bypass planned, and when you look at maps, and I have a map that I'm going to show in a minute, you can see this sort of hatch mark area that runs sort of behind Pasadena Ranch and right through the heart of some really beautiful country. So originally the idea was to have a bypass road there, but that idea was abandoned, although Caltrans still owns the easement. And East Side Parkway was kind of the alternative for that. And people are, asking who's in charge of East Side Parkway. The county has received a lot of letters about the East Side Parkway. It's actually FORA that is responsible for that road. And I need to get an update from FORA on how that's going. I understand that there's been discussion about whether or not an EIR is required and whether they can tear off of existing and old materials. And so that's kind of a hot topic right now. There's also a plot of land that on the county maps is marked as an office park, but on other maps is marked as a recreation space. So in my opinion, the official designation is open space recreation because, well, that's what's in the, not only is that what's in the base reuse plan, and there's been no change to that parcel, but it's also in the county's own general plan as open space recreation. So the county's own general plan says that that's open space recreation. There's also talk at the county of expanding Laguna Seca, having some businesses there that are symbiotic to the racing, automotive kinds of businesses of that sort. So I know that the Office of Economic Development was looking at what kinds of businesses they might attract up there. And then just really quick, the Marina has a number of projects that were entitled and then the market crashed and they didn't go forward. The Dunes, Marina Heights, Cypress Knolls. Seaside has some areas that go by the name of Main Gate. That's at the Light Fighter Drive, Highway 1 intersection, and Seaside East, which is east of General Jim Moore Boulevard. The city, to my knowledge, doesn't have any serious activity on those parcels. They've got some visioning that they've done. They've talked to some people about possible interest, but it's really nowhere near moving forward at this point. And then CSUMB faculty housing. There's a large parcel of land that was reserved for housing, but CSUMB has said because their growth projections did not pan out, they don't see doing anything with that parcel for decades. There's also the Veterans Cemetery. MPC has a police training center. Chartwell School is located there. They're looking at an expansion. So there's other projects, but I just wanted to hit on a couple of names, and I apologize that it's so quick. I can't cover the whole base plan in 15 minutes, but this is a map. It's not going to be readable. Well, this is a map that's in the base reuse plan that I've tacked up on my bulletin board because I just find it helpful. You can kind of see the big green swath. That's BLM land. And then there's different colors there. And you can't read this, but I do encourage you to look in the base reuse plan at that. And I will mention one other thing, too. I know there's been some confusion, and somebody asked me to clarify this. Some people have been saying that 85% of Fort Ord is reserved for open space or public space or something like that. It's actually 85% is for public use. So that includes the CSUMB campus, the UC MBES Center, I think it may even include some of the Army because it's government. So I'm not sure how that 85% was calculated. But if you want to know how much was actually reserved for open space, again, turning back to this chart, it'll give you the percentages. There's a column called percent. And you'll see habitat management 61%, parks and open space. There's 4% is Fort Ord dunes and 4% other. And pretty much that's what you're looking at. So it's about 69%. So it is a lot of land that is designated for open space. But there is another issue that goes on with this base plan. It's not just about numbers and lines on the map, but there's also a whole set of policies that were adopted by the FORA board. And if those of you who are familiar with general plan documents know that general plans have policy statements that are supposed to guide the planning process. And so I just want to talk a little bit about those. One of the policies was about preserving the oak woodlands. The northern part of Fort Ord is heavily forested with oak trees. And one of the statements that is repeated throughout, and I just took one for an example, is that the jurisdictions shall coordinate in the designation of an oak woodland conservation area connecting the open space lands of the habitat management areas, which are mostly to the south and east, and shall maintain a large contiguous block of oak woodland habitat. And again, I can't give you the whole flavor of this, but the idea is that they're supposed to be connecting the oak forest that runs through the north down to BLM. And when you look at that corridor of oak forest, the Whispering Oaks Business Park was going to go right smack in the middle of it and interrupt that contiguous oak woodland. And there's, again, this statement is repeated over and over again in the policies of the base plan. There's also a requirement that the jurisdictions create a unified system of hiker, biker, and equestrian trails which links all sectors of the former Fort Ord and encourages alternative means of transportation. And again, the Whispering Oaks project would have interrupted a trail, an important trail that runs from the equestrian center down to BLM. So the Fort Ord rec users and LandWatch were able to pull these policies out, pull these maps out, pull the base reuse plan out and say, wait a minute, you say it's consistent, but it's not. Here's what it says on page 400. Here's what it says on page 50. Here's this map. That was a very effective tool for the organizers for Whispering Oaks. So I do encourage people to take a look at the base plan with the caveat that it will frustrate you. But it is worth becoming familiar with it and engaging in the struggle. And I think I've just hit my time limit. All right. Thanks, Amy.
One